Hello, you curious people. Welcome back to Curiosity. Back with another argument against free will. Why have you been inactive all these days? Well, that's the thing. I don't have free will. As much as I wish I could make videos every day, I couldn't. Circumstances forced me to do otherwise. Anyway, let's get straight into it. So as I drop all these arguments, mind you that not all arguments are going to be as convincing as the other. So what matters is that you go through all the arguments thoroughly so that you truly understand and grasp how and why free will doesn't exist. Today I present before you an argument from British-Australian philosopher J.J.C. Smart, which is also called the standard argument against free will. In fact, if you've followed my videos, you already know what the argument is, although you don't have a name for it yet. The standard argument against free will goes like this. Either determinism is true or indeterminism is true. If determinism is true, your will is not free. If indeterminism is true, your will is random and not up to you. Free will is incompatible with both determinism and indeterminism. You don't have free will. Another version of the argument is this. If your actions, choices and decisions are caused, they are not free. If your actions, choices and decisions are uncaused, they are not free either. Your actions, choices and decisions are either caused or uncaused. Therefore, you don't have free will. So now let's go back to those videos where I discuss all these. I'll just repeat those arguments again here for clarity. Determinism negates free will because Premise 1. The universe works based on the laws of the universe. Premise 2. We can't control the past and the laws of nature. Premise 3. Given the past or the present, that is fixing the initial conditions, and the laws of nature, everything that will happen thereafter is fixed. That is, the future is fixed. The future is locked, also known as determinism. Premise 4. We are also a part of the universe. Premise 5. Since the future is fixed, we can't do otherwise than what we actually end up doing. Premise 6. Free will requires the ability to do otherwise. Conclusion: determinism implies free will does not exist. Alright, even if we grant, although unlikely, that the deterministic interpretations of physics are all wrong, we could only get to the conclusion that the universe is fundamentally random, and randomness by definition is uncaused and uncontrolled. You don't have control over randomness. It happens out of nowhere. When determinism makes your will unfree and forced by causes uncontrolled, randomness or indeterminism might sound free, but it won't be your will. It would be random. You will have no control over that will, that randomness. Your will is either determined, in which case it's not free, or it's not determined, in which case it's not a will. Free will is impossible. Suppose a mad scientist has captured your friend and implanted some kind of brain control device. He enters commands into a machine and your friend has no choice but to follow them. Most of us would say that he doesn't have free will as someone else is now controlling all his actions. But what if the scientist got a bit lazy and decided to put the machine on autopilot and have a roulette wheel decide his behavior? With this addition of randomness, does he now have free will? Most of us would still say no, right? MIT physicist Max Tegmark did a detailed analysis and concluded that the brain is too wet and warm and macroscopic and prolonged for delicate quantum effects. Superposition of quantum states is notoriously difficult to maintain. As far as we know, for things that are warm, big and slow as us, the Newtonian laws are the effective physics. It requires isolation such that the system does not interact with other atoms or any other classical materials such as the various fluids and structures in the brain, because the quantum system would then become entangled with its environment and decohere so that it would no longer be in superposition. Tegmark showed mathematically that any superposed state in neurons would decohere within 10 to the minus 13 seconds. So such fast quantum mechanical effects influencing brain functioning is hard to imagine. Matthew Fisher, physicist at University of California, Santa Barbara, also showed mathematically that the temperatures needed to maintain superposition based on the frequency of neuronal firing is about 10 to the minus 7 Kelvin, which is of course much lower than body temperature of about 310 Kelvin or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So the brain appears to be both too wet and too warm for quantum processing, just as Max Tegmark said. The human brain consists of a completely different environment that is not conducive to quantum particles for their random behavior to affect brain processes. For significant quantum effects to manifest themselves, you need to be in a very controlled environment, preferably at an exceedingly low temperature, to screen out all of the noisy influences from the surrounding world. But the brain is actually anything but that sort of a system. Quantum effects on a large scale manifest only at very low temperatures near absolute zero. Brain is a hot, wet, noisy system. It's really hard to see how quantum mechanics could play a role for anything bigger than a tiny bunch of molecules. On a multicellular scale, it seems almost impossible to imagine that it would play a significant effect. In the presence of heat, atoms, molecules and tissues begin to vibrate, which makes the interactions between the waves very chaotic and lose its quantum nature. All the relationships between the different waves are scrambled up. That makes it very hard to see how quantum effects could exert any sort of serious impact in the brain. Those quantum effects are going to have to bubble up 20-30 orders of magnitude to begin to explain a single action potential, which takes about 3 or 4 milliseconds. That is about 10 to the 23rd times longer in duration than a quantum effect in an electron. That's a hell of a lot of bubbling up that needs to happen to get to just that level of biology, which just does not happen. There is an actual fallacy of composition there, that the features of the whole system have to be the same as the features of which the system is composed. The fallacy says that if the features that compose the system are random, then the whole system must be random. That does not follow. Just like the classical world, the quantum world too is still following the laws of nature. The law here being the Schrödinger equation or the Heisenberg equation. It's still a set of equations. Initial condition wave function, put it in the equation, out comes the other side, the prediction of what will happen. In the equations there is some probabilistic element, but the fundamental elements are not probabilistic. Just look at the mathematical expression of the laws of motion of quantum systems. Those equations are deterministic. They don't explicitly have any stochastic or probabilistic feature in them. There is a completely deterministic flow of the quantum state of quantum systems in spacetime, and then the probabilistic element comes when one performs a measurement of one of these properties. So there's the laws of motion that are deterministic, and the outcomes of the measurements are stochastic. Some people say quantum physics has a mystery at its heart. Free will and consciousness are mysterious, so maybe one mystery explains the other. That doesn't really follow. That's fallacious thinking. It's a slippery slope and opens the window for all kinds of woo-woo and a bunch of charlatans like Deepak Chopra. But let's dive deep into quantum randomness. One important principle of quantum mechanics is the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which says that we cannot simultaneously measure the position and momentum of a particle. The more certain you are of a particle's momentum, the less certain you are of its position, and vice versa. Also, take superposition principle, a particle not being in a specific state at a time before measurement. But there are problems with the interpretation of this scientific conclusion. Even if in principle we cannot measure them, it doesn't mean that there is no definite position of a particle. Even if you do not know or cannot know the position and momentum of a particle before measurement, it does not mean that the particle doesn't have a position and velocity before measurement. Philosophers would say it's putting the epistemic cart before the metaphysical horse. It's also called the metaphysical horse fallacy. Metaphysics or ontology is the study of what is, what exists, while epistemology is the study of what we can know and how we know what we know. Is the result of quantum mechanics epistemological, or is it ontological or metaphysical? So is it the case that we simply do not know the properties of a particle before measurement? Or is it the case that the universe is fundamentally random at bottom? Copenhagen interpretation says that the uncertainty is ontological. It asserts that there's no such thing as a definite property of a particle before measurement. The metaphysical horse fallacy occurs when one takes as primary epistemology over metaphysics. Many facts about the world are generally considered not dependent on whether we can know about it and how we can describe it. And therefore, simply drawing some conclusions about what we can't know doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So for example, if we can't know anything about a point of time in the past, doesn't mean that there isn't some fact of the matter about that point of time in the past. It just means that we can't know about it. Similarly, just because we can't know about the properties of a particle before measurement doesn't mean that that particle does not have any property before measurement. Trying to claim that our epistemology defines the metaphysics of the world is putting the epistemic cart before the metaphysical horse fallacy. This doesn't prove determinism by any means, but it doesn't prove that the world is fundamentally random either. Quantum mechanics does not help us with saving us free will. Our neurons, brains with which our decisions are made, operate in the macro world where quantum effects are inapplicable and ineffective. Now, even if indeterminacy or randomness proves free will, this randomness is a property of all matter, not just conscious matter. Then why does it mean that only adult humans have free will and animals don't have it, or a tree doesn't have it, or a baby doesn't have it, or a rock doesn't have it? A decision is uncaused if it happens as a matter of pure luck or unluck. It just means that you did not cause those decisions. They just popped up uncaused, randomly, uncontrollably. If your decisions have reasons behind them, then they were caused by the principle of cause and effect, in which case you don't have free will. If your decisions do not have any reasons or causes behind them, then they just happened randomly. You did not cause those decisions. You don't know what came over you. They just came out of nowhere. In which case, you don't have free will either. Remember the last video we talked about chaos theory and weather. Weather appears unpredictable for us with our limited ability and knowledge, but is it uncaused? No. Similarly, through experiments, quantum mechanics does appear unpredictable and random, but why do we have to conclude that it is ultimately uncaused? Even if we think it is locally random, there are reasons to believe in some kind of non-locality, and globally, the universe could be deterministic. You cannot conclude that the quantum world is random, as it could be that there are hidden variables at play. By the way, there are many prominent scientists and physicists who think the universe is ultimately deterministic. Now, even if the particles in the micro world did behave randomly and they somehow caused our behavior, that's still causality. You can't break away from the causal web. Even if everything was random, where is the free will? Quantum randomness negates free will just as much or even more than causality or determinism. If random events happen at the quantum level, we did not choose the randomness. You are not the author of the randomness. The randomness is not up to you. They are not influenced by you, regardless of exactly what you mean by you, because they are not influenced by anything. That's the whole point of saying they are fundamentally random. Nothing determines their outcome. There is no will in this, not yours and not anybody else's. The idea that we have free will, which gives us the possibility to freely select among different futures, is both logically incoherent and inconsistent with the laws of nature. The universe is either deterministic and we don't have free will, or it is indeterministic and we don't have free will, or it is some kind of weird combination of both and we just don't have free will. Did you like the standard argument against free will? Do you think it's sound? What are your thoughts? Tell me in the comments below. Now start sharing these no free will arguments left, right and center. Don't forget the basic argument. Stay tuned and stay curious. I'll see you in the next one.